In Birdville ISD, we are building opportunities for literacy daily. We have a new definition of literacy in the 21st century. It's no longer just about reading, writing. Literacy is the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, compute, and communicate using visual, audible, and digital materials across disciplines and in any context. No matter what you teach or how old your students are, literacy is the key to your students accessing the content in your classroom. So it's important for us to open our minds to this broad definition of literacy and think about how can we, in each of our roles, support our students' growth within our own classrooms. So in August, you learned 2 strategies that we can all use to help our students as they move through different types of text in our content areas. So the first strategy we looked at was read, cover, note and write, remember, and retell. And this strategy causes students to look at chunks of text as they move through a longer piece to make sure that they're capturing all of the details. The next strategy we looked at was called 3 questions that helps students really reflect upon any bit of text that they've just read. So now let's focus on a new strategy that can help students, again, across the content areas and grade levels. This strategy is called Reread and Sketch with More Detail. It can work with our reading levels in Fountas and Pinnell A through Z+, and with all Lexile levels. It's especially useful in nonfiction. The skills that are employed in this strategy are helping students visualize what they're reading and monitoring for meaning. All they need is a paper and a pencil, and we'll even look at some ways that you could take this strategy digital. In this strategy, students will read some text and then sketch details from that text, and then go back and reread that text, and that's probably the most important part of this strategy. It's a time to look at what did we capture from that first read, what new details are we seeing, what new meaning have we discovered, so that we can go back and make our sketching reflect that. Then we can use the sketch to make sure that we are discussing and sharing that thinking, which again is super critical to our literacy skills. We have to be able to not only read and write about it, but also discuss. And then we can write notes to help verbalize what we visualized in our sketch. So again, here are the steps just broken down simply. We read, we sketch, reread, add details back to that initial sketch, retell what we've read, and make notes. So here's some examples that show you how students across grade levels and content areas can utilize this strategy. We have a primary example, and we can tell a student must be reading a story or some nonfiction piece about a cat, and as the student goes back and rereads, we're starting to get more detail. I'm now seeing that this cat is actually furry and has claws, where at first I only paid attention to it being warm. So this student has been able to get a lot more detail out of that reading through this sketching. We have an example in science, really capturing the biology and the things that go on within the rainforest environment here. So each time I'm going back to that textbook, perhaps reading about the rainforest, I'm finding new details and adding that into my sketch. You may have heard about a trend in both digital learning, and also it can be done just with paper and pencil, and it's the idea of sketchnoting and using our sketching to help us make meaning as we move through text. And if you want to explore the idea of sketchnoting, there's lots of tips that we could teach our students to give them some strategies, such as using arrows and different shapes to help them use some visual cues to make meaning as they read. So we hope that you will now read an article yourself that we have posted below this video so that you can practice using this strategy as you read, and then think about ways that you could use this in your classroom to help your students move through difficult text.